Alright everyone, and now we have a case that is both concerning and uplifting. The result thereafter being the uplifting part with Gregabbott standing in the gap, and he is doing what is right here. The Daniel Perry farce trial, of course, taking place down in an urban location in Texas and showing an example of what I've talked about with people. This is why my balkanization thing doesn't work. This is why state-level politics can get funky sometimes. Texas is an overwhelmingly red state. In fact, even the border counties that are heavily tilted towards the Hispanic vote are becoming conservative. If you look at the last couple of elections, the blue Texas mythology that I've been dispelling for years, yeah, demographics ain't shit if you're looking at southern Texas. I think that you're thinking about California or Nevada or someplace like that. Texas does it a little bit better. It's like a whole other country because it's literally bigger than France, and as a result it has a sort of unique quasi-nationalistic state culture, which is good, by the way. I've been throughout Texas and I loved it. Texas is great. About the only problem with the Rio Grande Valley, I'd move there in an instant, except there's not a whole lot of water there and the soil sucks, so gardening, it would be a little bit more difficult, I think, to grow the kind of crops that I'm interested in. Don't even know if you could grow like broccoli or something down there unless you had a refrigerated spring house. Be very interested when your greenhouse has a cooling element. The Daniel Perry trial is a goddamn farce, and it never should have happened. And in most parts of Texas, it never would have. Daniel Perry, Army Sergeant actually, so this is an individual who had the gun training that liberals want gun owners to have since he has served for years in the U.S. military, has been found guilty of murder. Why? Because he was driving as an Uber driver, which is irrelevant to the case, but it was still heard by the jury anyway for some ludicrous reason. Well, Uber drivers aren't supposed to carry firearms. Yeah, Uber now supersedes the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That makes a lot of sense. Jurors mentioning that, it's like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? And what are you smoking? Oh, wait, it's the Austin City area. I think we know the answer. Probably doing more than smoking it, too. He gets put on trial because he was driving as an Uber driver, and BLM, this is back in 2020. You remember all those big fiery but mostly peaceful riots that they had over literally every issue for several years in the wake of George Floyd? This is pertinent to one of the major BLM riots that happened there. And his car got surrounded. They were rioting in the streets. And people began attacking, by the way, his vehicle. Now, under Texas's stand your ground law, the car is an extension of your home. You effectively have castle doctrine in the state of Texas if you are in your vehicle. You are allowed to defend yourself. The jury effectively found that he was guilty of murder for something that is the odd reverse of a rare happenstance in law that I have spoken of before. I've spoken of, for example, a DA can prosecute you. Somebody breaks into your house. You have a firearm on one side of your hip and you have a taser on the other, and you tase them. You can be charged with aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, etc. Because clearly, if it's a sleazy DA, they can argue this, and occasionally successfully do. You should have deployed the gun. The fact that you deployed the less than lethal means that you weren't in fear of your life. Since you weren't in fear of your life and limb, you had no reason to deploy anything. It is a de facto admission of your guilt. You assaulted my client. Even if you get found not guilty on any criminal charge, you can be held civilly liable. And that person can say with a straight face before a court in a civil case, suing you for $100,000 or whatever for pain and suffering. I have arrhythmia now because he tased me. Well, clearly the defendant didn't fear for his life, so he had no reason to tase me. And sometimes that'll be accepted by a jury or a judge, by the way. Now, in this case, they're saying the opposite, which shows that even in a solidly red state, it could be a no-win situation to defend yourself at all. They're arguing that Mr. Perry deployed his firearm when he had less than lethal means available. The person in question who he shot walked up to his vehicle carrying an AK-47, and it appears that he pointed it at Mr. Perry. This is cut and dry goddamn self-defense. In no other part of Texas would it have even gone to a trial. In fact, many legal experts in Texas are like, what the hell are they even doing? That's because the prosecutor there happens to be Soros-backed. We've seen a little bit of this lately. Now, that's the bad news, that self-defense is embattled even in the state of Texas pertinent to who you shot. If it hadn't been a BLM member that had been shot, if it had been some MAGA hat wearer with a shotgun instead of some BLM thug with an assault weapon, by the way, liberals not noticing that part of this story, probably it wouldn't have gone to trial either, because there would have been no significant outrage mob to try to force a prosecution, thus showing the democratization of our legal system as well as in full swing. That's not a good thing, by the way. Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, has vowed to attempt to pardon him. The problem being under Texas state constitution, he can't just unilaterally pardon somebody for such a crime. He has to wait until I think there's literally like a pardoning board that he has to consult first. Now, they're likely to give him the go-ahead. He'll be able to put pressure on them and say, look, this dude clearly defended himself. This has nothing to do with your feelings about politics. It's cut and dry. And if he doesn't get pardoned, Greg Abbott can probably find some sort of workaround. I'm sure that there's some methodology by which they could potentially amend the Texas Constitution. They presumptively have the votes to do so, and then he can go forward. He's already pledged to do that. Now, Mr. Perry, because the governor's saying, I want him pardoned, at the very least, when he's in his cell, he probably doesn't have to worry about Bubba right now. I'm sure that there's more protection available for him. This is fundamentally an innocent man who reluctantly drew his weapon and fired when his vehicle was attacked. And now he's being defamed as having somehow broken the law because he broke Uber's rules. Uber's rules do not supersede Texas state law or the Texas or U.S. Constitution. In fact, Uber should not be allowed to have such a rule. Disarming your workers, who are freelance effectively anyway, when they are on public roads. They're not in a business. They're not in a brick and mortar. They're not in the Uber factory. They're in their own registered vehicle. That should not be allowed. We probably need to legally address this side of the issue as well. People should not feel compelled when they're Ubering through an urban area with a reasonable crime rate to be disarmed. That's just basically putting a fucking target on those vehicles. It'd be like, hey, taxi drivers aren't allowed to carry a baseball bat. Go ahead and mug them, basically, is what the taxi drivers union and the city officials would be saying. Probably is the case in Manhattan by this point, judging who their DA is. The Daniel Perry trial should never have even happened. What we're seeing is that trials like this that are spacious in every possible way and would otherwise be doomed to fail are prosecuted for political reasons, in part because of the outrage mob forcing them to be prosecuted. In some of these cases, you have the prosecution of people by relatively reluctant legal system that simply doesn't want to be continuously protested and harassed by thugs. And that's what BLM are. They are thugs. They form a gang syndicate at this point. Just a bunch of extortion racket bullshit if I ever saw it. That's about all. Peace out.